PureOS is one of those operating systems that quietly exists in the background of the Linux world, yet represents some of the most radical and uncompromising ideas about privacy, freedom, and user control in modern computing. In 2025, when data collection has become the default business model of the tech industry and operating systems increasingly feel like services rather than tools, PureOS stands out as a deliberate rejection of that direction. To understand what PureOS really is and why it matters, you have to look beyond surface-level features and focus on the philosophy that drives it, because PureOS is not just another Linux distribution. It is a statement about how computers should work and who they should ultimately serve. PureOS is developed by Purism, a company that has built its entire identity around digital freedom, user privacy, and ethical computing. Unlike most tech companies, Purism does not position privacy as a marketing checkbox or an optional feature you can toggle on or off. Instead, privacy is the foundation on which the entire system is built. From the choice of software repositories to the exclusion of proprietary drivers and firmware, PureOS is designed to ensure that the user has as much transparency and control as possible over what their system is doing. In 2025, when even many Linux distributions include proprietary components by default for convenience, this approach feels almost rebellious. At its core, PureOS is a new Linux distribution based on Debian. This gives it a stable, well-tested foundation with access to one of the largest collections of free software available. However, PureOS is not simply Debian with a different wallpaper. It takes Debian's free software principles and pushes them to their logical extreme. PureOS only includes software that respects the Free Software Foundation's definition of freedom. That means no proprietary drivers, no closed-source firmware blobs, and no non-free applications in the official repositories. This decision has far-reaching consequences, both positive and challenging, and it defines the PureOS experience more than any desktop environment or visual design choice ever could. In 2025, most operating systems prioritize convenience, hardware compatibility, and performance optimizations that often rely on proprietary code. PureOS deliberately sacrifices some of that convenience in exchange for trust. When you install PureOS, you can be confident that every piece of software running on your system can be inspected, audited, and modified by the community. There are no hidden background processes phoning home to unknown servers, no telemetry systems collecting usage data, and no opaque binaries that you have to blindly trust. This level of transparency is increasingly rare, even in the open-source world, and it is one of the main reasons PureOS continues to attract privacy advocates, journalists, activists, and technically inclined users who value control over comfort. One of the most important aspects of PureOS is its certification by the Free Software Foundation. PureOS is one of the very few operating systems endorsed by the FSF as fully respecting user freedom. In 2025, this endorsement carries even more weight because the number of truly free operating systems has not grown significantly, while the rest of the industry has moved further toward proprietary ecosystems. FSF endorsement means that PureOS meets strict criteria regarding software freedom, documentation, and licensing. It also means that users can rely on PureOS as a platform that aligns with the ethical goals of the free software movement, rather than merely borrowing its language. The desktop environment used by PureOS is GNOME, but with careful customization to enhance privacy and usability without introducing unnecessary complexity. In 2025, GNOME has matured into a polished, modern desktop that works well on both traditional desktops and touch-based devices. PureOS leverages this flexibility, especially considering Purism's own hardware, such as the Librem laptops and the Librem 5 smartphone. The interface feels clean and minimal, avoiding flashy animations or distracting elements. The goal is not to impress with visual effects, but to provide a functional, distraction-free workspace that respects the user's attention. Privacy-focused design choices are evident throughout the system. For example, PureOS does not include any built-in cloud integration tied to third-party services. There is no forced sign-in, no default connection to external accounts, and no system-level tracking. Even seemingly small decisions, such as default search providers and update mechanisms, are handled in ways that minimize data leakage. Software updates are delivered through trusted repositories without requiring user accounts or telemetry. In a world where even checking for updates can involve sending identifiable information, this approach makes a meaningful difference. Another defining feature of PureOS in 2025 is its focus on convergence. Purism has long promoted the idea of a single operating system that can run on laptops, desktops, tablets, and smartphones, adapting its interface as needed. PureOS plays a central role in this vision. With technologies like PureOS, a GNOME-based mobile interface, PureOS can scale from a full desktop environment to a mobile-friendly UI. This convergence is not just a technical novelty, it reinforces the idea that users should not be locked into different ecosystems depending on the device they use. Whether you are on a laptop or a phone, the same principles of freedom and privacy apply. The application ecosystem on PureOS is entirely composed of free and open-source software. In 2025, this ecosystem is more mature than ever, covering most everyday computing needs. For web browsing, PureOS includes a privacy-hardened browser configuration that emphasizes security and minimizes tracking. Email clients, office suites, media players, and communication tools are all selected with freedom and privacy in mind. While some popular proprietary applications are not available, the alternatives have improved significantly over the years, often matching or even surpassing their closed-source counterparts in functionality. That said, using PureOS does require a certain mindset. It is not designed for users who want everything to work out of the box with zero compromise. Hardware compatibility can be a challenge, especially with devices that rely heavily on proprietary drivers. Graphics cards, Wi-Fi adapters, and certain peripherals may not function optimally or at all without non-free firmware. In 2025, this remains one of the biggest hurdles for PureOS adoption. However, for many users, this limitation is a conscious and acceptable trade-off. Choosing PureOS often means choosing hardware that respects freedom, or at least hardware that can function adequately with free drivers. Purism addresses this issue by offering its own hardware lineup that is designed to work seamlessly with PureOS. Librem laptops and devices are built with free software compatibility in mind, using components that do not require proprietary firmware whenever possible. These devices also include additional security features, such as hardware kill switches for the camera, microphone, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. In 2025, these features feel less like niche extras and more like essential tools in a world where surveillance and data breaches are increasingly common. Security is another area where PureOS takes a principled approach. Rather than relying on closed-source security solutions, PureOS emphasizes system hardening, regular updates, and transparency. The system benefits from Debian's robust security infrastructure with timely patches and a well-established process for handling vulnerabilities. Disk encryption is supported and encouraged, and users are given the tools to secure their data without being forced into proprietary ecosystems. In a time when many security products themselves have become vectors for data collection, PureOS's approach feels refreshingly honest. One of the most compelling arguments for PureOS in 2025 is its resistance to surveillance capitalism. Most mainstream operating systems, whether proprietary or open source, are increasingly influenced by business models that depend on user data. Even when data collection is anonymized or optional, the underlying assumption is that users are a resource to be monetized. PureOS rejects this assumption entirely. There is no incentive to collect user data because the project is not built around advertising or data-driven revenue streams. Instead, it is funded through hardware sales, subscriptions, and community support, aligning the interests of the developers with those of the users. The user experience of PureOS reflects this alignment. There are no nagging prompts to sign up for services, no suggestions to integrate social media accounts, and no background analytics running silently. The system feels calm and focused, allowing users to work without constantly being reminded that their attention and data are valuable commodities. For many people, especially those who spend long hours at their computers, this alone can be a transformative experience. In 2025, PureOS also plays an important educational role. By using PureOS, users gain a deeper understanding of how their systems work and what software freedom really means. The absence of proprietary components forces users to engage more critically with their hardware and software choices. This can be challenging at first, but it often leads to a more empowered and informed relationship with technology. PureOS does not try to hide complexity behind glossy interfaces. Instead, it encourages users to learn and take responsibility for their systems. Critics of PureOS often argue that its strict adherence to free software principles makes it impractical for mainstream users. There is some truth to this criticism. PureOS is not trying to compete directly with consumer-focused distributions that prioritize ease of use above all else. Instead, it occupies a different space, one where ethics and principles take precedence. In 2025, as concerns about digital rights and privacy continue to grow, this space is becoming increasingly relevant. Another common criticism is performance. Because PureOS avoids proprietary drivers and optimizations, it may not deliver the same level of performance as other distributions on certain hardware. Gaming, for example, is not a strong point for PureOS, especially given the reliance of modern games on proprietary graphics drivers and platforms. However, PureOS is not designed for gaming enthusiasts or performance benchmarks. Its target audience values trust and transparency over raw performance numbers. Community involvement is a crucial part of the PureOS ecosystem. Users are encouraged to participate in development, report bugs, contribute code, and engage in discussions about the future of the project. This community-driven approach ensures that PureOS evolves in line with its core values rather than chasing trends. In 2025, when many open-source projects are increasingly influenced by corporate interests, PureOS's community focus is both refreshing and important. The future of PureOS looks closely tied to broader movements advocating for digital rights, privacy legislation, and ethical technology. As governments and organizations become more aware of the risks associated with data monopolies and surveillance, operating systems like PureOS may gain renewed attention. Even if PureOS never becomes a mainstream choice, its existence helps push the entire industry toward better practices by demonstrating that alternatives are possible. Ultimately, PureOS in 2025 represents a clear answer to a simple but profound question. Should your computer work for you, or should you work for your computer and the companies behind it? PureOS firmly chooses the former. It may not be the easiest operating system to use, nor the most compatible or feature-rich, but it is one of the most honest. For users who care deeply about privacy, freedom, and control, PureOS is not just an operating system, it is a declaration of values. In a world where convenience often comes at the cost of autonomy, PureOS reminds us that technology does not have to be this way. It shows that an operating system can be designed with respect for the user as its highest priority. In 2025, that message feels more important than ever, and PureOS stands as one of the strongest embodiments of that philosophy in the Linux ecosystem.